Accessibility is really important right now, especially with the growth of AI agents, because AI agents are actually going and crawling and looking at websites and using accessibility to explore them. So if your application is not accessibly compliant, it's not accessible to people who have disabilities, but also to AI agents. My job in the past was to take your designs and to make them into code. Now my job is more to take your code and make sure it's good code.
Welcome to AI Designer Club. I'm Ali Rastian, design leader and strategist. On this channel, I explore how designers can turn their ideas into real products and business using AI confidently and end-to-end. Today, I'm joined by Blum, front-end engineer and code consultant. If you're a designer building solo with AI right now, this episode is for you. We talk about the things vibe coding doesn't cover by default and the invisible stuff you still need to think about, like security, testing, code quality, and how to actually know when your product is ready to ship, not just when it looks ready. Enjoy! Today I have a special guest with me, Blum. He's actually an engineer. Don't be surprised and don't run away. He's the first engineer who actually touched vibeland.dev, fully vibe-coded product that I created. Hi, Aaron. Welcome to AI Designer Club.
Hi, Ali. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Aaron, why should a designer who is thinking of bringing their idea to life, so they want to work on their product and tool, why should they listen to us today? What do they learn by the end of this episode? The fact is that AI gave me the power to do the whole flow all by myself. I can be designer, engineer, product manager, all the way through. Why should a designer listen to an engineer again?
So that's a good question, Ellie. And I know it's scary working with engineers sometimes, but also it's scary coding alone with AI. We're very often coding in these isolated environments now, and it's easy to think, I can just do it with AI and Claude, and I don't need anybody else. But the truth is that we don't want to be working blind. We want to be investigating and curious about the code that we make and we produce. And we want to be able to easily help each other. So as we were working together, Ellie, I was able to help you understand parts of the code base that you had no idea about. And I was able to learn things as well, looking at the code that you produced. So today, I think the goal of like our conversation is to help designers uh, learn some skills, some tips, some real practical things that you can do to your code base, with your code base, to learn some ways that I can help you as an engineer be more autonomous and responsible with your code as well. I think about it this way. There's now a new experience and feeling I have when I create a plan with Claude Code, with Cursor, with Gemini, and it creates this amazing plan and we create it together. But then I'm not really certain, is this good? Is everything in this plan the best practice? Am I missing things? And so that piece is really essential, this oversight or this collaboration between product and development, between design and development, all of the three categories or more, to really have these checks and balances in place. And I think my job in the past was to take your designs and to make them into code. Now my job is more to take your code and make sure it's good code.
When I built vibeland.dev,
Yeah.
It was working properly. There wasn't really
Yeah.
any friction. And you actually, the first time you saw it, you said, "Oh, this looks pretty cool."
Yes.
And but then you came back with this bunch of feedback and fixes, and I was like, "Wow, what was this crap that I was working with?"
Right.
Tell
Yeah.
me, tell me about that. Why should we still? So I'm a solo founder. Why should I still work with an engineer?
This is a great question, Ellie. So really the question is, what is important in code? What is code quality? What is good code quality? What is bad code quality? I think that a lot of people who are vibe coding now, um, they're making their applications and they work, and it's so cool to see all of these applications being built. When I try to use them, it's a different story. So the things that I initially notice are little inconsistencies. Either they're design inconsistencies or functionality inconsistencies. There's different bugs that occur. So like when I looked at vibeland right away, initially, I was like, I think I found a couple bugs about logging in or like being able to post a site, things like that. And that's kind of like why I initially reached out to you, like, oh, I'd like to post my site here, but it's not working. So that was like, that's the initial overview, is like the experience of an application, I think, is less consistent in a vibe coded app than a really strongly engineered app that is very well architectured. So that's, and then the second part is that's why what happened with us is I began to audit Vibeland in 6 different areas, including security and organization and all of these engineering, front end engineering principles. And I found a lot of holes and a lot of inconsistencies.
What really scared me was that the security that you talked about.
Yes.
From my point of view, like, this works. Why should I be so concerned about that? This works. I can log in also, and I can publish something there. And
Yes.
then why should I be scared of security? And what does actually mean, like, security?
Security is very important for many different reasons, and there's many different aspects of security, but mostly it's a protection for your users, it's a protection for your application. It decreases the opportunities for attacks or hacking. There's specific technical aspects like exposed URLs or exposed user data. These are all important aspects of security that are legal. Sometimes they're legal requirements, actually, when you're dealing with user data and user protection. So yeah, that's why security is important. Does that make sense?
When we talk about, like, code security, how can I spot these insecurities, basically?
So one of the things that I do in my consulting work is I run different audit reports on vibe coded websites. If you actually go to my code consulting website, I now have posted 6 different rubrics for 6 different areas of applications. One of them is security. So you can actually download the security rubric and you can give it to your AI cursor or Claude Code, and you can say, does my application, my vibe coded application, fulfill the requirements, or for uh, give me a score based on this rubric of these security areas. Evaluate my application and tell me how secure my application is.
Thanks for putting this out. And it's for free, right?
That is for free, and you can go there and download it.
I want to speak on behalf of designers. I'm right now not working with engineers, and I'm doing the whole process from 0 to 1. I'm doing it all by myself using AI. And then on the other hand, these AI tools are promising good code, especially Claude, that the written code is pretty good and, like, secure in that sense. but then you're telling me that's not.
I imagine we have different experiences using Claude Code. Part of it is just our experience in our field. While I'm Claude coding, I'm often looking at the output that the decisions that Claude is making. And I'm often being very critical about the choices about authorization and security, for example, where the authorization is living, how many um, requests are being made. You know, I think that I'm like Claude is very it tends to reinvent the wheel a lot. So if you ask it to make an application, oftentimes it will just create an authorization system, a user authorization system from nothing. It will not use a third party library or it will not use already established practices. It will not consult the docs, the official docs of React or Next.js or whatever to figure out I need to put the auth layer in a kind of like a wrapper layer so that we don't have to make a request every time a component or a page is loaded. This is a lot of technical jargon, right? But essentially, what I'm doing is I'm looking for these bigger systemic decisions. And I think as a designer, you don't have that technical engineering background and experience, but I think that you're going to start thinking about these things. And part of my job as a consultant is to just help you start thinking about these six big areas of performance, security, accessibility, organization. And there's two others that are just like race conditions and these principles of the front end, like do not repeat yourself or single sources of truth, things like that. Do you know what
Mhm.
I mean? Like, what do you think about that? Does that make you think about your
Yeah,
experience?
of course, this would be an ideal situation. Would be like we as a designer would work with an engineer. There's no question into that, and I'm not going to say that now we don't need an engineer, and I'm
Yeah,
just good by my own. How could a designer who doesn't have access to, let's say, hire you, have
right,
like, and they don't have also this technical knowledge? How
right.
could we bring the barrier lower? Like how vibe coding has brought the
Great.
barrier
Yeah.
lower?
I think that the starting place would be go to my code consulting website, look at the six categories and the six rubrics for those categories. The categories are bugs and correctness, performance, security, UX and accessibility, design system, and dry solid SSOT kits. Um, just download the rubrics, give them to Claude Code, give them to your AI, tell them to run an audit, run an analysis on your code base. Tell Claude to give you a report. Which categories are the weakest and which are the strongest? For me, I would start always with security and performance. Those are kind of the most important things that will make your application feel solid. Then move on to things like accessibility. Accessibility is really important right now, especially with the growth of AI agents, because AI agents are actually going and crawling and looking at websites and using accessibility to explore them. So if your application is not accessibly compliant, it's not accessible to who have disabilities, but also to AI agents.
There are also some barriers when it comes to publishing them on stores.
100% true, Ellie. There are requirements for publishing in the Apple App Store for sure. They look at security, they look at performance, they look at bugs and the whole accessibility experience. Same with Google Play Store. Web applications are less regulated, but that doesn't mean that these things are not important. They are important. It's just that when you're self-publishing on GitHub or on Vercel, uh, you control. There's no one telling you what is important and what to fix. It's your job to know that. So that's where I would recommend like going and looking at these categories and really taking a deep look at your application underneath the face of it.
And the tools, the rubrics that you mentioned, they're easy to use for designers. Is there any specific setup that they have to
Nope.
maybe you can explain about the process to make it less scary for us?
Yeah. This is what I love about Claude Code now. What I do is I literally, they are PDFs, so you just download them, and I drag and drop the PDF into the Claude Code window, and then I say, can you analyze and audit my application based on this rubric and these criteria in this rubric? That's it. And then it works. It just runs the report. One thing that I remember with Vibeland is that when I initially audited the site, one of the biggest things was test coverage. Do you
That's
remember that?
actually, yeah, that's one of the topic I wanted to talk to you about. What does I know what's this, right? I had this in mind that okay, I'm using Claude and Claude Code is like code of Claude Code is pretty good, as they say. It probably is covering that part too. So it actually didn't really come to my mind. I don't know about other designers who are vibe coding. Is this something that they do in their like a routine vibe coding flow? But yeah, you came back to me that, oh, there is no single line of tests.
Yeah.
And what should we do now? And I actually tried to do something when you told me, I tried to fix it by myself, but then it was, I would say, a bit late for a non-technical person like me to start doing setting these tests in place.
Let's first start talking about what TDD is, which is test driven development. So there's different kinds of tests, right? There are unit tests and there are end-to-end tests. There are penetration tests. There's many tests. Usually when I'm coding and I'm working on a feature, I will write a test first and I will describe what is supposed to happen. The user logs in and then is redirected to the main page. The button to log out triggers this function to log out the user. So I write the tests first, and then I run them, and they're all red, so they're all failing. And then I start writing the code. I write the actual component code, and that is test-driven development. So then I make the tests pass based on the code. So I write the code to make the test. We don't have to think about that so much anymore. What we're doing now is we're just telling Claude and Claude Code, just make it. Just this is what I want, just make it. And it will do that. You can also tell Claude Code to use TDD, test driven development. And so this is another aspect of vibe coding now is how do you configure Claude Code or Cursor or Chat GPT Codex? How do you configure it to to produce high quality code? And these are the um, fundamental aspects that we have to teach it. It doesn't know, oh, I need to do TDD. So we have to teach it. You need to do TDD. And that doing TDD can often create a very solid code experience because it's not inventing things on its own. It's not hallucinating. It's really about creating code that meets the demands of the tests.
So basically, to simplify this,
Yeah,
when I, as a designer, am working on, let's say, a feature, what I would do is that in simple language, I will ask, hey, could you also create or write tests? And
absolutely.
and then it would do it for me. But then to make it more understandable, these tests are basically like tests to know that if this feature actually is working properly, right?
Yes. There's different kinds of things we test, right? We test for functionality, we test for visual uh consistency, we test for unit tests. And so one example is like, does the user authorization work? That's a big that's a big general thing, but more specifically, I think it's like, does this login button uh does it like oftentimes there's error handling. So when the user logs in and it fails, is there a response? Is there feedback for the user, like an error message or a success message? And then on the other side of the testing experience, so you do TDD first before you write the code, then you write the code. And then on the other side, there's end to end testing, which I find very helpful to create end to end tests for user flows. So if I have an admin user versus a regular user, I can create one end to end test for that admin flow and then a different one for the regular user's flow. And I can run those and use a tool. The AI now will run the tools kind of for you. There's different libraries that they use. One is called Playwright, one is called Cypress, but it runs these end to end flow tests, and you can watch it in the browser. You can watch the experience, and then you can see, okay, there's a bug here, there's a problem in this user flow. The user was not able to get all the way through to creating their site on Vibeland or something like, you know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but then Claude also does this test, like it takes also screenshots and sends it over again. Now I'm in this page, now I went through this part. And I actually, most of the time, I figure that this is actually wrong. Sometimes the page is not loaded and I say, oh, the picture, I can see the page is loaded properly
Yeah.
and it works. But this is also not really counted as tests,
It's not,
written
yeah.
tests.
It's not a true end-to-end test, because the difference is that we're writing a full end-to-end test, or Claude is writing a full end-to-end test. So you can actually go into the code and look at the code of the test and look at the flow. It's like, first, click on login button. Second, fill out username. Third, fill out passwords. Fourth, click login button. You know, five, expect that login was successful. Things like that. And what you were talking about is good. Like, Claude is able to open a browser and actually look at the browser window and look at the development server. But two things: it's very expensive in terms of tokens to open a browser and to take screenshots. And I actually caught that very early on. Like, my token use was really increasing dramatically when Claude was taking screenshots. So I made a rule in the Claude sol file, in the config file, that it's not allowed to use screenshots. And now it actually goes out and uses the dev tools and looks at the browser differently and uses less tokens. But second of all, it's just taking your prompt. It's like, hey, Claude, does the user flow work? Then it'll open a browser and it'll try to run the user flow. It's going to be different every time it does that. It might forget
Yeah.
different parts of it. So that's why you do want to have these end-to-end tests that are more solid and more consistent.
Okay. So let's say I work on a new feature and then at the end I will ask, write me a test.
Yeah.
Like test this feature, does it work? Right?
Very important. That was a great distinction. Not like, does this not test this feature, write me a test. That was,
Hmm.
yeah, brilliant, Ellie.
Okay.
Write me a test. Yeah, go ahead.
And then for so You mentioned bugs. This is what we didn't cover, and also SSO, dry and solid. Is there anything that designers could do to cover this part?
I would say that the start is just to get familiar with the ideas and just to start thinking about them. And let's talk about them. One is dry. Do not repeat yourself. So if I am noticing patterns in the app, when I look at the code and I notice, oh, this is happening more than 3 times, this in the same way, it's happening more than 3 times. That is an opportunity to create a reusable component or function or feature. And then you're not repeating yourself. So you're always reusing that single thing. Then there's SSOT, which is single source of truth. So this means like what is the single source of truth? And this can be applied in many different ways. Where's the truth of the data? Where's auth living? Claude tends to create different sources of truth. It could have a list, it could have a way to authorize users on the front end and also have the user data on the back end. And then there's two sources of truth, and that's not good. And it creates duplicity and confusion in the app.
Stop you here. When you were talking about dry, you weren't really talking about like 100% about
Visual.
components or design system, right?
True, absolutely. Mostly I was talking about the code underneath the front end, underneath the face. These principles also apply to the front end. Just a simple example, with a true good design system, you would have one button that is reusable across the entire app. It might have different variants, but it's one button and you are always using that everywhere. And that's always using the source of truth for the elements of the button, like colors and borders. Like those, the source of truth for those are the design tokens.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, if we start with a design system, then we are somehow are secure and safe in that area, right?
Absolutely. Starting with the design system and creating a component library is a great way to prevent these violations of dry and violations of SSOT. Yeah, it sets you up beautifully to create a organized app. SSOT, single source of truth, it can be applied to authorization, but it's just everywhere in the app. As a developer, I'm always thinking about um, whether there's different sources of truth.
Why should it concern a designer? And then how could a designer set the basic?
Why should it concern a designer? Because designers are now coding. And, so imagine you're taking your Figma designs and your design system, and now you're telling Claude to go and make a component library or just to make an application from your mockups from your design system. These are things you have to think about. You just need to um, cre- create engineered code in an organized way. And so, yeah, just thinking about these concepts is the start. One other thing I thought about, Ellie, was one thing I set up for vibeland, um, which was a continuous integration pipeline. Um, and I think that you are now getting much more familiar with GitHub and Git Flow, right?
That's true. And it's very convenient. Like when I push something, then it goes through some checks basically. And then if it's all some sort of test, in my opinion, and then if it
Yeah.
passes all these tests, then it's good to merge.
Exactly. And I think that this is another really important part of vibe coding now is getting really familiar with two things, Git and Git flow, and how to make conventional commits and work with a repo with many people working on the same code base? How do you merge and squash and rebase and all these are this is basic Git uh, protocol stuff that I think designers really would they would it would help designers a lot. And then the second thing is exactly what you said, the continuous integration checks. So I set up these checks that tell GitHub every time someone makes a commit and pushes to the code base, run these checks, run a linter, which is with checks the code for clean code. One is a TypeScript check for TypeScript apps to check for TypeScript errors. Another is test coverage, so it runs tests. And another is it runs the build. So it checks that everything is running before anyone's allowed to even think about merging their merge request or their pull request into the main branch. And the last thing I'll talk about, Ellie, is something that you actually implemented, which was Chromatic. And Chromatic is a brilliant tool to test visual regressions. And it's a tool that is so good to collaborate between designers and engineers that tells you if there's any visual changes, and then it sends the notification to the designers, and then they can look at it and look at the changes and then approve or deny or change things. And that's a great, so these are all great tools to test also.
Another question, does it use any token doing
Great
this?
question.
We are also short on budget and we're working solo. How could we
Yes.
also make it tight and not so expensive?
I love this question, and it's a great segue into something I was going to talk about. So we're all now very concerned with our token usage, and you should be aware, first of all, of which model you're using in Claude Code. Um, and I actually I found a lot of resources about token usage, but one of them is just a small thing. It's a skill. So you can add skills to your AI, right? And so this is a skill called caveman. And caveman is a skill that tells Claude to talk like a caveman. So it actually cuts like when you write a prompt, maybe you're using 350 characters or 350 words to write a prompt. And caveman cuts it to the bare basic, the fundamental words that make it sound like a caveman. And then that actually, what I was able to measure a decrease in my token usage um, from week to week.
The name is also very catchy. So, Aaron, tell us what you actually do. How do you make designer's life easier?
Great question. So I am a code consultant, and what I do is I run different audit reports. I work with designers. I work with everybody who's vibe coding apps, right? So if you have a vibe coded app, I'll work with you. But most of the experience I've had so far is with product designers and designers who are making vibe coded apps. And what I do is I run different audit reports. I run audits on 6 different areas, including security, performance, bugs and correctness, UX and accessibility, atomic design, and these fundamental principles of development like dry and kiss and solid SSOT. I'm a former teacher, so I love working with people. And my mission is really to help you learn so you can do it on your own the next time. I have free resources on my website. We talked about this a little bit. I have these rubrics that you can download and just run on your own code base. If you have questions, you can contact me by email, by LinkedIn. And I'm so open. I'm so willing to help you out. Like, this is what I love to do. And I guess the mission is really just to get your application and the vibe coded app to a production level. That's really just a great, important thing.
Yeah, exactly. So you cannot stop right now. It's like we have this tool that can do everything for us. And in this channel, I talk to designers who want to bring their ideas to life. And this is still, it is our motto, like we don't want to change this fact. It's just that how could we make sure that we actually function and work properly and create great tools and products that are usable and not broken, and they don't just look nice and don't have proper background.
Exactly.
So if someone like Aaron can help with that, that would be it's really an ideal situation. So the thing is that when I started vibeland.dev, no engineer really touched the code. For me, it was like, this works and I'm fine and it goes on, and I have a product right now. But I still know that AI will not replace an engineer, and it doesn't replace me as a designer either. We still need, at the end of the day, if we want to especially create like a really powerful product, we still need each other's expertise. Of course, again, back to the budget. We don't have that much budget, or like maybe we're working actually full time on another with a company, and this is our side project. We just want to test to see how it would work. And where the sort of resources that Aaron mentioned are going to be helpful. And then if you want to move it forward, and if you have many users, if you're planning to have, like, let's say you want to set authentication, you want to look into different aspects of your product, how could you expand it? Then Aaron definitely can help. And the nice thing is that he will set these automations that will help you to actually work by your own again, like not to still be dependent on another person to help you every single time.
Exactly, Ellie. Very, very well said. And that's such an important part that I want to emphasize, is that you are the owner. You still have major ownership of Vibeland. You're, I'm, after the auditing and the fixes I suggested, you're the running that ship, and I'm kind of there to help and support if you have questions, or if there's any bugs that are discovered and you can't figure it out. But you are like, you created that and you are still coding on it, and it's great.
Thanks. And if a designer wants to, same with engineers. If you want to wait for the missing role in your team to work on a product, you might never really do that. When I had the idea, if I wanted to wait to create something very secure, or like from engineering point of view, like well set,
Yeah.
I would never really move forward with this idea. So that's great that we have AI, but we shouldn't forget that this is not everything. Maybe one day, you never know, but at least at
You
this
never
point.
know. Yeah. Yeah, let's see what comes in the future. But I think right now you're totally right. AI right now is a great tool, and it's a great skill to develop and for yourself. And it's a superpower, but we have to be very careful about how and the ways it's producing code and the quality of code it's producing.
Thanks so much, Aaron, for joining us today. And thank you for staying until the end. Go to Aaron's website to download the free rubrics and run them on your code base to make your vibe-coded product production ready. You can also find him on LinkedIn. All the links are in the description below. And if you're a designer building with AI, you're in the right place. Subscribe so the next episode finds you. Cheers!